So I'm a curator of microbial genomics here, and I reside in the Division of Invertebrate Zoology. And you might be thinking, why on earth is there a microbiologist coming to talk to us in an island symposium? But actually, I've done almost all of my research studying parasites in island systems, particularly in the Caribbean, but now moving into the Pacific. And so islands are very close to my heart, and partly for that reason, I've chosen to live on one, though it doesn't feel very islandy some days. What I'm going to do now is introduce our 4 case study presentations for this morning, and then the caffeine levels will have subsided to a point where we need to get you back out into the hall and refuel those. So let's start it off. Our first speaker will be Jason Alemu, who is going to do a presentation called Speyside Marine Area Community-Based Management Project, a case study for socio-ecological resilience in Tobago.
Hello. Hi, good morning. So as Suzanne said, my name is Jason. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. And listening to the presentations we had yesterday, we got a lot of definitions about what social resilience, or what resilience was on a whole. And it made me think about my definition of it. And I know working back home in Tobago, I never used the word resilience. So it actually made me wonder whether I really understand what it means, because if I can't articulate it to the communities within which I work, how do I expect them to understand what it means? All right, so, and in thinking about this presentation and the interpretation of what resilience is, I think this might be more of a case study of increasing the capacity to cope rather than building resilience, which is, I guess, one of the foundation blocks for resilience anyway. So, just to give you some perspective, Trinidad and Tobago, it's the southernmost island in the Caribbean, right? Yeah, it's this island here, right? Southernmost island in the Caribbean, just off Venezuela, directly influenced by the South American continent. Twin island states, 2 islands, 1 government, right? The GDP of the island actually comes from oil and gas, which makes us a bit unique. Unlike most of the other islands in the region, we are the only and the largest oil-producing and exporting small island state in the world, all right? Most of our exports actually come to the United States, all right? So much so that energy production, it trumps everything else. So the long and short is that, well, we don't need ecotourism, right? That whole thing about fisheries and sun, sea, and sand, that's rubbish to us. Technically speaking, we don't need that. If you were to split the islands in 2, though, all right, Trinidad is very industrialized, so it's built up. That's where the energy production is. Tobago, however, is your typical Caribbean island with sun, sea, sand, but it's not marketed for that, right? But the people who live there, they do have that connection to the reefs, to the forests, etc. So they try to maintain that. So I'm actually going to be speaking about one particular community located in northeast Tobago. It's called Speyside Community. Now, the island itself, it has a very large main ridge through the center. Most people live within the southwest of the island. Very few people live within the northeast. So this is a very small community. It's about 1,000 people. Education's between the primary and secondary school level. There's high unemployment. Most people actually work for the state in some clerical capacity or some form of construction. There's high level of unemployment. So that's a very big social concern for them. A lot of subsistence farming, subsistence fishing, recreational activities within the water. You have steep hillside that comes directly onto very narrow rocky shores, so there's no sandy beach here. It's also a very turbulent area. It's where you have the conversions of the Atlantic and the Caribbean Sea, so it's a very high energy area. Now, given all of this, it also offers the best that Tobago has to offer, right? You'll find our healthiest reefs there. You'll find our largest fish. You'll find the most the largest birds, the healthiest forests. You find the best that we have to offer on this side of the island. As a result, the people on this side of the island, they identify with, they have a sense of community or national pride as a result of that, more so than the rest of the island does. So there's a sense of pride that this is theirs. And these characteristics, whether it be the fishing, the remoteness, the limited coastal development, these characteristics also threaten the community because people come to the island to get away, not necessarily for tourism, as most other islands would. Because of the remoteness, you've had a strong national impetus to develop the steep hillside. So we've had these proposals for hillside developments. There are proposals right now for developing the seafronts. They want to dredge through some of the reefs so that you can so they can bring cruise ships in. And they're actually exploring for oil just off the reef right now. So all of these things are happening right now, and the community obviously is not very happy with this. All right. So, but it's since the 1960s, the uniqueness of the Speyside marine area has been recognized. In 1985, the local government that manages Tobago, they acknowledged this only once in passing in a local government discussion, that the area should be protected. Nothing was done until 2002 when a management plan was drafted. Nothing was done then. I think it was the UNEP, I think, who contracted consultants to do a management plan for the northeast of Tobago. Nothing happened with that. We've had several NGOs, CBOs, student reports, various agencies, all proposing these various management plans for the area to get it protected. Technically speaking, it does not need, in my opinion, any official protection because it's such a high energy area and so remote. It has these natural barriers that prevents most destructive activities. So it does not need protect a marine park as such, probably just needs to be managed. That said, people have recognized its importance. You've had all this work done and nothing has happened. And the community has actually become a bit jaded because with every effort, they've been asked for input. The usual story: asked for input, made promises, nothing happened because this is something they really wanted. So fast forward to 2008, a project was started to map the coastal ecosystems around the island of Tobago. So a unique opportunity presented itself. The mapping project was incomplete, but when it got to the Speyside community, several things were happening in Speyside. Those same threats I mentioned, so the villa development on the hillside, the seismic and exploratory gas, well, oil and gas exploration was happening off the island, as well as a non-consultative, if that's a word, process was being put in place for the development of the waterfronts. All of this is being done without consultation. So a unique opportunity presented itself where all of this was happening. There was a lot of turmoil within the community. The government was going to go ahead and do this thing. The community was asking them to stop, but the government's argument was that, well, where's your data? Where's your proof that we need to conserve this area? Where's your proof that this area benefits? Show us dollars and cents. You know, show us what the connectivity is. So when we got there, we got funding from Jeff to do this one-year project. 1 year obviously wasn't sufficient, but we got funding to do this one-year project called the Speyside Marine Area Community-Based Management Project. The premise being, if we can demonstrate to the government that if a community were allowed to manage its own resources, and this is just a unique case, if they can allow to manage their own resources, they can probably, well, if they're asking for data, they can provide that data for you, but also it can be a demonstration to the rest of the island. Because when you look at the rest of the island, we have another MP on the island. It's a paper park. It's been that way for the last 40 years. If you wanted an example of what not to do, right, that is the example. All right, so I think we technically speaking, we should be in a better off position to do something with Speyside, but that's not the case. So the premise being, we can use this as a demonstration site, right, with these specific goals. Well, to develop the database, which is the data that the government was asking for, community-based, well, to build local capacity. And how we did that was through through using a whole reef to ridge concept. So over the course of a year, realistically, we could not achieve these goals. It was not possible within 1 year and $1 million. What we were able to do, though, was to seed the groundwork for the continuity of the project by identifying champions within the community who can carry it forward. And that's what we were able to do. So these objectives were realized, but after the 2009 period. So for most of the year, it was more engaging with communities, doing a risk a needs assessment, figuring out what they need and seeing how it meshes with the government's needs and see whether some dialogue could be established there. All right, so we actually established two groups established themselves, which we facilitated. All right, one was based in the community, and the other one worked more with local government. Everyone lived within the community. We actually had the local government representative for the community on that committee as well. All right. So of those two groups, one particular group was called the Speyside Eco-Marine Park Rangers. This is a group, they took this as an opportunity for them to be the de facto Speyside Park Rangers, if there were one. And they've probably been the biggest success for this entire project. They really took this project, let's see, ended in 2009, and it's still going on now. So they took this project 3-4 years into the future, beyond the scope of what we thought was possible. So they've become one of the largest lobbying agencies within that community, but they've also become a voice for the community within local government. So there's an actual bridge between what the community wants and what the government is trying to do. Something that we thought we would not have been able to do in 1 year's time, but this group, after the end of the project, and continuing with our help, was able to continue doing that. They've also been able to expand their vision beyond the community of Speyside, where they're actually doing similar work with other islands within the region, using new media. So they actually have a soap opera, a radio soap opera. Radio is king for us in Tobago. A radio soap opera through climate change messages and learning exchanges with other islands in Grenada, St. Lucia, etc. So we're quite proud of this particular outcome. And a limitation, though, is getting funding for the sustainability of the group, the usual story. Other things in terms of building livelihoods, we train them into how to collect the data, but we also have them working with the Department of Natural Resources and Environment, where they're monitoring water quality as a result of the hillside developments. But they're also working with local hillside developers, mostly residential and agricultural developments, a sort of informal hillside planning where, in terms of, if you're building a hillside house, they will assist or they will tell you where best to put, for example, sediment traps, or if you can build above a particular band of forest. It's a bit more difficult with the villa development because that's a government contractor and he's not exactly listening to the people. And they've also recently established another group called Blue Caribbean, whose sole role is just going to be monitoring the marine environment while they focus with the interaction with the government. I've touched on these already in terms of project challenges. The main ones would be building the trust and identifying champions within the communities. And the main lessons learned was to build that relationship. Fortunately, I was local and I lived in the community, so I really didn't have a problem there. But the problem in the past, though, was you had a lot of non-locals, you had a lot of people who weren't from there coming and making these promises and not working. And at the end of the project, they just left. We kept working with them until the end. And that's about the size of it. So, questions? One question?
Hey, Jason, great talk.
Hey.
Hey, so you sort of talked about social resilience being part of this, and clearly people are much more engaged now,
Yeah.
at least this group of people. Is that translating in your mind to an ability to deal with the circumstances around them better? So the challenges you talked about ahead, how would you start to sort of frame some of those social developments, I guess, in terms of their ability to deal with perhaps changes in the ecosystem, or some of the political changes that are going around? Are you seeing some capability
Yeah,
improvements?
so what's been happening is really information in terms of building their understanding of what's happening and how it has impacted them. And we've actually gotten them, or they've gotten themselves on the same table with the with local government. They're part of the discussion, so they have a better understanding and they can get their viewpoint in the in the decision-making process. So that's probably been the main success of this so far. How long it lasts, I'm not sure, because we just had an election. So there's a 5-year memory with each, every 5 years things change. So we'll see what happens in the next 5 years, but that's probably been the main success. They've become like the largest voice within that community. In fact, they've partnered with nearby communities who are having similar issues. The government has a plan for the entire area, not consulting the communities. So they've partnered as well with similar groups, and they've become that face and voice of these communities. And they're on the same table articulating the problems that they're all facing for now. That's it. Thank you.